Aloha, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 4. This is usually module number 2. Great job on the first module if you're done already. I hope these videos are helping you. There's also a way, thank you, Nicole, for showing Gwyn. When you go into your textbook via Laulima, there'll be a little speaker icon in there. You can actually have the IDAP read the textbook to you. So now that I know that, no more videos, I'm done. Okay, bye. No, I'm kidding. So have the textbook read to you. If you're busy doing something, watching some kids or cooking, have it read to you, because it's actually, people are kind of realizing it's a really interesting textbook. Okay. So again, I'm going to try to do this in under 15 minutes. I think I got 10 or 11 slides here. This is a truly fascinating chapter. So let's get started. Okay, so one of the main things we're going to talk about in this chapter is the perception process. And it's kind of confusing sometimes because we think, well, we study this in psychology or even sociology sometimes. Why should we study this for communication? So for communication, it's important because what we see really influences how we communicate, if you think about it, right? How we see things, hear things, and as we get through this chapter, how we interpret things. So let me disappear for a second here. And so we can kind of see everything on here. Okay, so here's from the slides, it's selecting which impressions we'll attend to. So when you look outside, what do you see? When you look at wherever you are, take a minute and look up. What do you see? I see a little coat hanger in front of me because that's in front of me. So here's things that commonly we're going to pick up on, right? As the listener, as the receiver, things that are intense, things that repeat. So think about Crazy Jerry if you're here in Hawaii. All kinds of news on or advertisements on the radio. They just repeat over and over and over. Windward Honda, Windward Honda. Contrast or change in stimulation. So really bright colors or a black and then a white. Things that are vivid, moving, right? Motives. Personal motives. So what are you interested in? So for example, say you want to buy a car, you need to buy a new car. When you're driving around out there, say in Kailua or Kaneohe, you're going to see what kind of cars you like. You see a red truck, you see a car for sale. Same thing if you're looking for a job, you're going to start paying attention more to jobs that are out there, jobs that are available. And you also ignore other cues. Okay, so I put here these movie trailers. You can zoom in if you want, but kind of think about how much effort these folks put into making their posters. We're not going to play the trailers, but you could actually. And think about what they're doing. They're trying to get you to select their movie, right? So you look at the contrast there, look at what's intense, look at what gets your attention. Okay, so if this first slide, we're kind of going to agree that what we see is not necessarily the same as what everyone else sees. So once you see that, okay, the next step after you select it, you're going to organize this organization. Again, this is part of psychology, but when it comes to communication, it really matters, right? So if I saw, for example, if I look back at, I remember Pulp Fiction. I saw Pulp Fiction. Where do I organize that? Where do I put that? How do I arrange that in some meaningful way, right? My schema, stereotyping, punctuation. Where does that go in there, right? So I see Pulp Fiction. I think of a movie. I think of like a crime movie with John Travolta and Samuel. I think of the 90s. It's an okay movie, and that's kind of where I put it, right? So I put this, actually, this is from the chapter. What are you looking at in this image? What's the first thing you see? Some people see a vase or a vase or whatever you want to call it, a chalice. Some people see two faces looking at each other. The question is, who's right, who's wrong? Or, this is the profound part, maybe there's no right and wrong. We just see things differently, right? So when you look at that, when you look at anything outside, where do you put that, right? Again, you see someone wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. How do you organize that? How do you make sense of that? Okay, so interpretation, here we go. The next step is, well, you select it, you organize it. The third step here is interpretation. And this is one of the terms you could write about as well. I have an MC Escher drawing over here. If you know who MC Escher is, it's a pretty interesting artist. And what you're doing is, let's just talk about what's written here. You're attaching meaning to sense data. So here your visual, right? Your visual senses are going, I see something there. I see birds flying like two ways. I see a chessboard. I see contrast. Factors that affect this interpretation. One is degree of involvement. This is interesting, right? If you don't really care about MC Escher or this picture, kind of go, yeah, Jeff, I kind of get it. Next, right? Personal experience. If you've seen a lot of these pictures of the vase one in the previous slide, you kind of know what's going on here. Artists are tricking you visually, right? Same thing if you go and you watch Saturday Night Live or some comedy skit, or you go to a hula show, for example. If you know what's going on, you're going to interpret maybe that first person comes out and gives a chant or something, you're going to interpret that very differently than someone who has no experience with it, right? Assumptions about human behavior. This is really a hard one here, but when you interpret things, for example, someone's late for work, we're going to assume why. We're going to assume they were rushing, they didn't sleep enough, maybe they were sick, all these things, whether it's true or not, okay? And also our attitude. If I'm just having like a bad day, think about this. If I'm having a bad day, I'm going to turn myself on here. If I'm having a bad day, and so if I'm having a bad day, your attitude really matters, right? If you're having a bad day and you're driving around and someone cuts you off, for example, because of your attitude, you're going to interpret that other person's what they did maybe in a negative way, right? So that's interpretation, how you see things. And then what do you do to communicate that? Okay. The next step here is negotiation. So this gets a lot deeper. This is not one of the terms in to write about because it's kind of a little bit harder, right? So we kind of figure out what's going on there. You know, the person's late for work, and then we're going to negotiate here. So influencing another's perception, trying to achieve a shared perspective. There's narratives here. So what this really means is, say my friend was late for work, and he's going, "No, Jeff, you know, I'm late for work because now I'm in this middle management position and I'm trying to show people I'm not stressed out." And you're going, "Oh, really? So you're doing it for, yeah, okay." So we're negotiating here, right? We're talking about this narrative. I put Area 51 up there because this will get to it right away, right? The little green men crashed in the 50s, whatever you want to believe about aliens and capsules, da, da, da. But there's definitely a narrative there. There's a story there, right? So if we talk about Area 51, if you don't know what it is, look it up. It's interesting. But there's a whole story and what's going on there. And none of us have actually been there, but through a process of selection, organization, and now negotiation, we go, when I see Area 51, I know they're talking about government cover-up and aliens, right? Until there's another narrative or story or someone who negotiates with me to tell me I'm wrong, or there's something, not even I'm wrong, there's an alternative reality. Sorry, my cat. That's what's going to happen. So again, it's part psychology, but it's a lot of it has to do with communication. Okay, next one. Influences on perception. And this is something I think you can talk about in this chapter if you want. Look at that. Everyone knows what that is. Extra credit. You do a Flipgrid video on it. Let me get rid of myself again very quickly. So what influences the way you see things and then therefore the way you communicate, right? Not only the way you talk to people, but the way you receive information. That makes a big difference, right? We're all realizing now it's a transaction. So access to information. So for example, if I never had the internet, I would not know there's such a thing as that beautiful, glorious McTerry burger there. For those in the mainland, I'm so sorry. I'd ship you one, but it would probably still be good by then. They never spoil. But access to information, go much deeper than that very quickly. Think about CNN, Fox News. Think about maybe in certain countries, they censor the news. Does that influence the way you see things? If someone only tells you the vaccine is good or the opposite, it's bad. Either way, if you only had information from one side, would that influence the way you see and then therefore communicate about things, right? Really quickly, the physiological influences, these absolutely matter in the way we perceive things. So the senses, how many of you go shopping when you're hungry? Shouldn't do that, right? Because when you're hungry, those senses, that perception is just hyper aware, hyper alert. And those chicken tenders sitting under the warmer at Safeway, whatever it is, the candy bar Snickers thing while you're checking out, that is selecting you. You're going for that food. That's happiness right now, right? So your senses matter. Psychological challenges. Again, if you're tired, if you're having a hard time in life right now, you're going to perceive things differently. Your age matters. As I get older, I'm getting hard of hearing. I hear things differently. I'm blind when I go surfing. I can't see. I don't wear contacts. So just because of my age, I'm getting older, my health, my fatigue, there you go. Hunger, biological cycle. We'll go through this quickly. All of these things will affect the way you perceive something, right? As I get older, I can't go to movie theaters anymore because it's just so dang loud. But when I was a kid, no problem. Okay, to keep going with influences on perception. What else influences the way you see things, right? The way you see life. And again, therefore, the way you interact with people, the way you communicate with people. So one is cultural differences. As you know, especially in Hawaii, there's such a variety of cultures, and we're different in many ways, right? Not one is better than the other. Some take their shoes off, some don't. Some bread, some rice. There's no one is, but ethnocentrism, right? That's when we start to go, well, this way is better way than the other way, right? And that's when it can kind of really have a big influence on a perception. So for example, if when you go to the continent, sorry, and maybe someone comes into your house and you're from Hawaii, they come in, they don't take their shoes off. You might perceive that as rude, like, whoa, hang on a second there, right? To take the Timberlands off, man. You can't come in like that. But then everyone starts to do it, and you realize, you know what? Maybe the Hawaii way of taking your, maybe it's not the best way or the only way, right? And this is cognitive complexity, back to chapter 1, to really go, you know what? Maybe that's the right way. Maybe we should leave their shoes on. Okay, it's hard. Let me get rid of myself here again so you can see these. What else influences the way you see things and talk to people and understand messages? Social roles, your gender role, male, female, right? Again, this is not sex. This is not the parts you're born with. This is the way you're engendered, masculine, feminine. There's a whole spectrum here, right? So does that affect being male or female or anywhere on that spectrum? Does that affect the way you see things, the way you see life, you interpret things? Occupational roles. Does your job matter? Does being a teacher make you see things differently than being maybe an 18-year-old professional student working at McDonald's? Do you see things very differently? You probably do, right? Relational roles. This is a big one. This is a really, really big one. For those of you who are in happy relationships with a partner, does it make a difference when you go out? Do you see other people differently? Do you perceive other people differently, right? Versus if you're single and you don't have a partner. Same thing with being a parent. If you have children and you are a parent, do you perceive things differently than before you had a parent? Would you interact with maybe a child who needs help on the bus differently, right? Would you perceive that differently before you had a child or now that you do have a child? So major influences here. I'm running out of time. Okay, common tendencies and perception, attribution area. So attribution is just we attribute things to people, right? If that person has a bad job, it's because they didn't do well in school, for example, right? That's ethnocentric too, but you understand, right? So attribution area. So we judge ourselves more charitably than we judge others. This is self-serving bias. This is one of the terms here. Back to my friend who's late. If I'm late, it's because I have a really good reason why, right? There was traffic, the leaky was shut down because the rock slide, whatever. But if my friend's late, oh, he should have slept in earlier. So this goes for a lot of things, right? Like if like I surf, for example, someone drops in on me, man, they should know. If I drop in on someone, oh, I'm sorry, the wave just popped up. We have this self-serving bias, which is quite natural among humans. Just be aware of it, right? We also cling to first impressions. So that neighbor who was maybe not nice to you, that first time you moved in 10 years ago, you still don't talk to that neighbor. And then the opposite is true as well, right? That neighbor, you really liked them, Maybe you found out they were a serial killer and they interviewed you. Well, they seem like such a nice, normal person. So that's the halo effect there. So if you have a minute, look at this little peanuts thing here. I think it's pretty funny. I'm going to go along here. Okay, almost pow here. So perception checking. So what can you do? This is one of the things where after you perceive something, maybe it's back to the person who cut me off. Okay, that person cut me off and big truck and they had long fluorescent orange sleeves on. I was thinking, oh man, the way I interpret that, right? I'm going to organize it, interpret it. Oh man, that guy's in a rush to his job he's doing labor, man. He's doing construction, right? So let's just play with that one. So see that one, a 6 or a 9. Is it good or is it bad? Does it just is? So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to describe the behavior I noticed. Okay. So for example here, a person cut me off in their car. Okay. Now, number 2, describe at least 2 possible interpretations of the behavior. Okay. Number 1, let's go with what you know, right? He's in a rush. He cut me off. It was rude. He wasn't thinking of others. There's one interpretation. Another interpretation, maybe it's his first day on the job and it's going to be his dream job and his partner just lost his or her job and they really need to get there. And because I'm such a responsible driver, there was so much space available. They went ahead and used the space in front of us. Okay. This, if I could talk to him, I would say a request for clarification about how to interpret the behavior. That's if you have a chance. Of course, as you do intrapersonal talking to yourself, you don't really have that chance. But I think getting to number 2, when you get to number 3, we'll talk about that later in conflict, but you can talk to people. Hey, was it really this or was it that? So check your perception sometimes. Here we go back to cognitive complexity, empathy, cognitive complexity, and communication. Empathy is really Right, it says right there, the ability to recreate another person's perspective. So as opposed to sympathy, here's how I think of it. When someone passes away, I usually send them a sympathy card. There's no empathy cards for Hallmark. There's sympathy cards. It's like I'm crying with you. Empathy is more like I can see what you're going through, even though I'm not in that hole with you. Whatever you're going through, right? Whether you're against me, even I can empathize with that. So that's kind of hard. So how would you feel if the mouse did that to you? I'm almost done here. I think the last one. Oh, 15 minutes. Here we go. Okay. Try this method, cognitive complexity. So kind of about what people were asking about in the last chapter. Um, pick an issue. It could be the traffic thing. It could be being late to work, anything. Okay. So just go through this. Number one, I'm right. You're wrong. Okay. You cut me off. I'm right. You're wrong. Number two, you're right. I'm wrong. Okay. You know what? You're right because you're in a rush to go to work. I'm wrong. I have nothing better to do. I shouldn't feel privileged. I shouldn't get so upset. We share the road, right? Position number three, we're both right. We're both wrong. We're both right for the obvious reasons. You're in a rush. I shouldn't get cut off. And we're both wrong. No one should be upset driving, right? If we can help it. And trying to cut people off, okay? Number four, the issue isn't as important as it seems. We're all good. You made it to work. I made it to the waves. We're all good. Position number five, there's a truth in all four perspectives. Okay, so this is getting a little deeper now. You know what? There isn't an absolute right or wrong. Okay, thank you. 15 minutes. I hope that helps. Let me know. I can talk a little more quickly or do fewer slides or talk longer. Okay, thanks, folks. Great job with week number one or module number one, and have fun with this chapter. Thank you.